Hello and welcome to Basics for Gamers presents the basics of stealth mechanics in Dungeons & Dragons. We'll be covering when you can use stealth, what the bonuses of hiding are, and more aspects of this often debated rule. First thing first, stealth in 5e is not a mechanistic approach with hard and fast rules for when stealth is or is not allowed. Instead, the rules provide a framework of guidelines to assist the DM in determining if stealth is possible, and it is up to them and them alone to make that call. With that in mind, let's examine how the rules handle stealth and hiding. Characters who do not wish to be detected by their enemies might choose to hide from them. The main benefit of being hidden is that the character receives the unseen quality, which means all of their attacks against targets that do not see them have advantage, and if they are attacked by someone who cannot see them, that enemy has disadvantage on their attack rolls. Please note that by rule this only applies to attack rolls. It is up to the DM to decide if they will grant disadvantage to saving throws, for example when a hidden wizard casts a spell that calls for a savings throw instead of an attack roll. By rule this would not impose disadvantage on that enemy's savings throws, but again it is up to the DM to decide how they are going to handle things in their game. 4 criteria must be met in order for a creature to hide. First, they must not be clearly seen. This is somewhat subjective and is, again, absolutely up to the DM to decide if you are or are not clearly visible. But some examples of when you might be able to hide are if there is concealment. For example, you're in a thick mist or fog, or if there's no light in the room and your enemies don't have dark vision. In a case like that, your enemies have trouble seeing you, therefore you should probably be able to hide from them. Another case where you might be able to hide is when you're behind cover. If you're behind an object that grants cover, and that object's not transparent, then you likely are not being clearly seen and you can hide. One caveat to the you may not be clearly seen rule is if all of the enemies in the area are distracted and looking the other direction. This is again going to be entirely the DM's call, but it could come from a bluff check, or an ally who's using their action to draw attention away from you, or your target is so engrossed in their work that they're not paying attention to what's behind them. In situations like these, there might be clear line of sight from that enemy to you, but since they're so distracted, the DM decides that they don't see you sneaking behind them. The second criteria that must be met in order to hide is that the character must be quiet. They cannot talk to an ally, they can't call out a warning, or make any other sounds that would reveal them. The third criteria to hide says that they must use their action that turn to hide. Now, one exception to this is if you are a rogue, in which case you can hide as a bonus action after 2nd level. And the fourth criteria says that if a character is in combat and is revealed to the enemy, for example they made an attack while hidden, that character cannot immediately hide in the same location. They must move to a new location to hide. Therefore, a rogue can't hide behind the same rock and just repeat attack and hide over and over and over again every round. Once they attack, they lose that hide condition and they cannot hide behind that same rock again. Instead, they're going to need to move away and sneak behind a new location and hide there. If you meet all 4 criteria, you can attempt to hide. You will make an opposed skill check, your dexterity stealth versus the wisdom perception of everyone you're hiding from. Since this is an opposed check, the person who is hiding must beat the perception rolls, not equal to or higher as is done with most checks. If successful, you become unseen and unheard. Again, this means you have advantage on your attack rolls and enemies have disadvantage on their attack rolls against you. And unlike in many other games, when you are hiding and sneaking, you do not suffer any penalty to your movement. If your speed is 30 feet, then you can still move a full 30 feet per round while hidden, as long as that movement doesn't remove your hidden status, for example stepping out into clear view of your enemy. If you fail the check against any of your enemies, you likely fail against all of them, because the one guard who beat your stealth check is just going to yell out, "Hey, there's a bowman hiding behind those trees," and reveal your status to everybody else. Once you are hidden, you remain hidden until one of these conditions are met. First, you are able to be clearly seen. For example, you hide behind a rock and then you walk away from it. Once an enemy has clear line of sight to you, then you are detected. 2, you are heard. For example, you're hiding and then you call out a warning to an ally. Making that noise is going to reveal your location to the enemy. Or third, you either hit or miss with an attack roll. Now note the wording here is very specific. Being hidden is canceled when you hit or miss with an attack. It does not say that you stop being hidden when you attack. The reason for this distinction is the hidden attacker is going to receive all the benefits of being hidden and every other effect that's triggered from being hidden on that attack roll. Therefore, the hidden state is not removed until after the attack is resolved. And this just ensures that they get advantage on that roll, and that if they are, for example, a rogue, they're going to be able to do their sneak attack bonus damage as well. The hidden condition is not removed until after the attack is resolved with a hit or a miss. Note that none of these conditions for losing the hidden state mentions time or turns or rounds. Once you are hidden, you continue to stay hidden and use your original dexterity stealth total until one of those 3 conditions is met and you are revealed. You do not continue making new stealth rolls every round or for every new enemy you encounter while being hidden. Instead, you keep using your original total. Since we're discussing stealth versus perception checks, we should also talk about the 2 kinds of perception checks that you'll face, and those are active perception and passive perception. Active perception works just like a normal skill, and it is used when a creature is actively searching. Passive perception represents every person's general awareness. Even when we are not focusing our attention on searching for someone, we're still aware of our surroundings. We still hear footsteps behind us or catch a little movement with our peripheral vision. Passive perception is not rolled, but instead is treated as if the creature had rolled a 10 on their check. Therefore, a creature's passive perception is equal to 10 plus the modifier that they use when rolling active perception. Since no dice are rolled with passive skills, if a character would have advantage on their passive perception check, they just add a flat +5 bonus to passive perception. And if they would have disadvantage on their passive perception, they subtract a -5 penalty from it. There is some debate over when a creature would use their active perception or when they would use their passive perception against a stealth check, especially when in combat. But the rule of thumb is if the creature used the search action that round, and therefore is not able to make attacks or use other actions, then they roll their active perception. And if they did not take the search action that round, they oppose the stealth checks with their passive perception. Now, one point to note here is that unless a creature is unconscious or somehow debilitated, their passive perception is always on. Always. Their passive perception is even working while they are using the search action and making an active perception roll. And this is important because a frequent criticism against using active perception is that you have about a 50% chance of getting a lower result than if you had just used your passive perception and not sacrificed an action. So why spend that action on something that has a good chance of being worse than if you had done nothing and just used your passive perception? And the answer to that, again, is because passive perception is always working even when you are making an active perception check. Basically, what this means is if you are actively searching, your total is going to be the higher of either your active perception roll or your passive perception score. You can't have a total lower than your passive perception even if you completely botch that active perception roll, because passive perception is always working. So even if you roll a 1 and fail your active perception check, you might still notice the hiding creature using your passive perception. For example, a guard is searching for a sneaking rogue. he uses the search action and rolls his active perception. He gets a 1, which means his active perception is way off. Maybe he turns his back on where the rogue is hiding and peers into another room. He is actively searching in the wrong place, represented by his low roll. But if the hiding rogue's stealth check is lower than the guard's passive perception, then that guard still hears the rogue's steps behind him and spins around to catch him. A common use of stealth and hiding comes while a character is invisible, such as when they benefit from an invisibility spell. Being invisible has 3 benefits. First, you are unseen, and therefore you have advantage on your attack rolls and your enemies have disadvantage when attacking you. Second, you can always hide. One of the criteria to hiding says that if you can be clearly seen, you cannot hide. Well, if you're invisible, you're probably not being clearly seen, so you can hide wherever you like. And third, you cannot be targeted by any spell or any other effect that requires sight. Many spells specifically state that they affect one target that the caster can see. If you're invisible, you're effectively immune to all of those spells. And this raises the question, why would someone need to take the hide action if they're already invisible? Well, because there are 2 aspects to being undetected. The first is that the enemy cannot see you, and the second is that they cannot hear you. Invisibility only covers the first part, and hiding is needed to cover the second. If you make a sound while invisible, or you do not take the proper steps to conceal your presence, then you are going to reveal your location. Unless characters take the hide action, in general, all participants in a combat are aware of each other. So even an invisible character might be detected during combat if they don't use the hide action, and opponents might know that they're there, but the invisible character still gets advantage to all of their attacks, and enemies, although they know where they're located, have disadvantage on the attacks against that invisible character. Let's illustrate these points with a few examples. As I go through these, again, just keep in mind that the stealth rules in D&D are not mechanistic, and the game relies heavily on each DM to make the judgment call for when stealth is or is not allowed. So the following are examples of how I would rule stealth in my game, but they may not be the way that your DM would. In our first example, Dela is investigating a bandit gang's hideout. She comes to an open door and pauses. On the start of her next turn, she asks to use the hide action. Her DM determines that she is not in clear sight of anyone and is not making noise, so they allow it and ask her to make a dexterity stealth check. She rolls a 14 and moves to the second doorway. She peers around the corner to find a goblin poking at the body of a dead bandit. Since Dela is mostly obscured behind the wall, the DM decides she is not in clear view of the goblin. Because the goblin is not using the search action, the DM compares Dela's stealth check of 14 versus the goblin's passive perception score of 9. Since Dela's stealth check is higher than the goblin's passive perception, she remains hidden. She is unseen and unheard by the goblin. She aims her hand crossbow from around the corner of the doorway and shoots at the goblin. She has advantage on this attack roll, but regardless of if she hits or misses, her presence is revealed. She is no longer hiding and does not receive any further benefits from being unseen. If she wishes to hide again, she must leave her current space and move undetected to a new hiding place. Now let's see how this may be different if the hiding character makes a melee attack. We'll use the same scenario, but this time Quinn is hiding at the doorway with his dagger drawn. He decides to sneak through the doorway and stab the goblin. But the second he steps here, he is now in clear view of the goblin and automatically stops being hidden. He is no longer unseen or unheard. He may continue and move next to the goblin and attack, but he does not have advantage and would not get his sneak attack bonus for being a rogue. The exceptions to this would be if the DM determines that the goblin is so engrossed in what they're doing that it is distracted and wouldn't notice someone walking up to it with a drawn dagger. The other exception might be if Quinn was invisible. Let's see how things are different if Quinn decides not to step into clear view. This time, he's patient, and he waits at the doorway. On the next round, he does not roll a new stealth check. Neither does he on the round after that, or the round after that. As long as he makes no noise and does not step into view of the goblin, he continues using his original stealth roll. Finally, the unsuspecting goblin decides to leave the room. Once he steps into the doorway, Quinn can lunge out and stab him from hiding. He will have advantage on this attack, and any other effect that triggers off having advantage like sneak attack, because he's a rogue. In our next example, Quinn has infiltrated an enemy fortress and comes to an intersection. He wants to avoid attention, so he uses the hide action. He makes a dexterity stealth check and rolls a natural 20 for a total of 27. He quietly sneaks to the intersection and peers around it to find two guards standing in front of a doorway. If the DM determines that the guards are being vigilant and using the search action to be alert, they roll their active perception. If they're milling about or chatting or otherwise not actively searching, the DM compares their passive perceptions to Quinn's stealth check. In this case, the DM decides that they're veterans and they're keeping a careful watch. He rolls their active perceptions, and the first guard rolls a 15 for a total of 18, the second guard rolls a 2 for a total of only 5. But since passive perception is always on, even when using active perception, the second guard opposes Quinn's stealth check with his passive perception total of 13 instead of that 5 he just rolled with active perception. Regardless, neither of their totals come anywhere close to Quinn's 27, so he is able to remain hidden and undetected. Now, Quinn needs to find some way of getting past them and to the staircase on the other side of the intersection. His player may be super confident about that 27 stealth check he just rolled and say he sneaks past the guards into the stairway. But the second he steps here, he no longer has any cover or concealment from the guards, he can be clearly seen by them and is instantly detected no matter of how awesome his roll was or how poor their perception checks were. If Quinn steps into clear view of an enemy, he is instantly spotted. The only way he can sneak through this intersection is to have some form of concealment the entire way, or to distract the guards to look the other direction. He could, for example, use a smoke bomb and fill the intersection with smoke. This would provide Quinn enough concealment to pass the guards without being spotted, but might not be the best idea since the guards will obviously know something is up, even if they don't know who or what was responsible or which direction they went. Another option might be finding some way to snuff out the torch that's lighting the intersection. If the guards are human, the darkness may be enough concealment for Quinn to pass through. Or he could drink a potion of invisibility to get past them, or with the DM's permission, maybe he could find some way to distract them. Perhaps he has an ally disguised as one of the guard's patrons who walks in and distracts them with conversation as Quinn darts to the stairway. In our next example, Quinn and Valen are hiding from a trio of goblins. For our purposes, the DM has determined that the foliage Valen is in is tall enough for him to hide in. We'll also assume the hero's stealth checks were higher than the goblin's passive perception rolls. Valen touches Quinn and casts greater invisibility on him. If I were the DM here, I would rule that the vocal component for casting that spell is loud enough to reveal Valen's location, but Quinn is now invisible. On Quinn's turn, he draws his sword and moves to attack the first goblin. Since he was already hiding behind the rock, Quinn stays hidden as he moves to stab the goblin. But just for the sake of discussion, let's say Quinn was invisible, but he hadn't taken the hide action. If he does not take the hide action first, then all three goblins detect his approach. They see dust being kicked up from his feet, they hear his steps, they see footprints appear from nowhere in the dirt. They don't have to make a roll to know exactly where he is because Quinn wasn't taking the appropriate steps to hide from them. But even though they know where he's standing, they can't see him while he's invisible, so he gets advantage on his attack rolls and they have disadvantage when they strike back on their turn. In this video, we examined the stealth mechanics in D&D. Remember, D&D does not use a mechanistic approach to stealth and relies heavily on each DM to rule when and how stealth is allowed in their games. Those who wish to avoid detection use the hide action. In order to hide, you must not be clearly visible to enemies, meaning you either need cover or concealment between you and them, or the DM could rule that your enemies have line of sight to you, but are too distracted to care or notice. Also, you need to remain as quiet as possible. Speaking or casting a spell could prevent you from hiding. When you hide, you roll an opposed skill check, your dexterity stealth, against your enemy's wisdom perception. If your opponents are using the search action, they roll their active perception, and if they're not using the search action, your stealth check is opposed by their passive perception scores. And remember, passive perception is always on, so if they use active perception and roll lower than their passive perception score, then you use the passive perception score instead. To succeed, your stealth check must be greater than the perception totals of your enemies. In case of a tie, the enemies win. While hidden, you gain advantage to attack rolls, and enemies have disadvantage when attacking you. Also, hiding does not impose any penalty to your movement. If you can move 30 feet per turn when you're not hiding, you can still move 30 feet per turn when you are hiding. You remain hidden until any of the following occurs. First, an enemy can clearly see you. For example, you move away from cover and into their view. Second, you make a sound, such as speaking or casting a spell. Or third, you hit or miss with an attack. There is no time limit to hiding, so you do not re-roll stealth every turn. Instead, you use your original stealth roll until you lose the hidden condition. Invisible creatures receive the benefits of being unseen, but their location is known by enemies unless they take the hide action to stay quiet and avoid leaving tracks. And if a hidden character has their location revealed, for example they make an attack, they must move to a new location before they can attempt to hide again. With that, we'll bring this video to a close. If you found this video helpful, please give us a like, and don't forget to click that subscribe button and the bell so you never miss out on our future videos. Leave us a comment letting us know what topics you'd like to see covered in our future videos, and we can always be reached through our Twitter and Facebook pages too. If you'd like to use some of the maps that we feature in our videos in your own games, you can find them at Maps of Mastery. A link to that store can be found in the description. Thanks for watching, take care, and we'll see you soon with more basics for your favorite tabletop games.